This is in the background of all my videos. It's the books that I read in 2024, which is 114 to be exact. But then, last week, I tried to read a book and I couldn't even make it through a single paragraph without having to reread and reread because I was getting distracted. And then I went back to my reading log and I realized I haven't read a single book this month. Actually, it's been 2 months. How did I not notice? So I did what any person at 2 a.m. crashing out would do. I went looking for answers. And what I found was a little scary. Reddit threads with thousands of comments. It wasn't just me. It felt like everyone was having the same problem. People who know that reading matters, who want to read, but find it almost impossible. Something changed, and none of us could figure out what it is. So I spent all of last week trying to figure out exactly what happened. And what I found out wasn't just about reading, it was about how we've rewired our brains to think that deep focus is torture. And sadly, there's no quick hack or little flip that you can switch. But instead, it's more of a road trip. There's 5 specific stops that each build on top of each other and will make you fall in love with reading again. So buckle up. The first stop is one that nobody really wants to hear. We poisoned our brains by accident. Every time you type a question in ChatGPT and get an answer in 3 seconds, or watch a YouTube video at 2 or 3 times speed, we are training our brains that learning is easy. And our brain follows a very simple rule. Information that comes in easily doesn't need to be remembered because we can get it back just as easily. So then we remember nothing, but even worse, we rewire our brain into thinking that all learning should come easily. And now, when we sit down to read, your brain experiences actual effort and strain. We haven't forgotten how to read, obviously, but we've trained ourselves that effort means that we're doing something wrong. We try to avoid all the friction in our lives, and now reading is the friction point that our brain is trying to avoid. Our phone has infinite scrolls, algorithmic precision, and dopamine on tap that lights up our brain like a Christmas tree. And if we put books in the same race as that, it will never win. Not because books are boring, but we're comparing them to a slot machine. So we can't rewire our brain while actively poisoning it. Meaning that we need to ensure one thing. Reading needs to happen before the wonders of technology have influenced our brain. For me, it's simple. I wake up at 10 a.m. and the first things that I do are slow. I read. I write. Things that would be incredibly painful and slow if I've already went on the internet, watched YouTube, or checked my email. But even if you nail this timing, you still made a fatal flaw that will guarantee that reading will be almost impossible. And that's because we're reading books that break us. In high school, I didn't read any of the books in English class. I would always just use SparkNotes. And the first time I really tried to start reading, I went into my genius twins room, which had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with treasures. I wanted to read something impressive, but scanning the bookshelves, all of them were bigger than my head. Except for one. Actually, I still have it, right here. The Prince by Machiavelli. It was tiny. It's perfect. It's barely 100 pages. I opened it up and started reading, and I couldn't even get to the second page. And because of this, I thought I was stupid, and I swore off reading for months after this. It wasn't for me. And this is an extreme example, but we do this all the time. We choose books that are sabotaging our efforts within the first 10 pages. We think reading needs to be something important, educational, something that we can brag about. So we avoid the thriller, we skip the romance novel, because what would people think? Stop it. Or even worse, we read books that we know that we're gonna like, but then are boring because we have already read every version of them. So here's the rule. If you haven't read a book in the past month, you don't get to pick anything that feels even remotely like homework. We want short, fast-paced, and easy. For me, that meant thrillers, Lee Child books specifically. Mystery novels that I can blow through in a single sitting without having to worry about it. Books that to me kind of felt like cheating. And here's the key. If you hate it, if you start trudging through it, forcing yourself to read it, get rid of it, and pick a new book immediately. There is no golden rule that says that you have to read books cover to cover. If it's not holding your interest, find a new one. And even if a friend recommended to us, and even if we should like the book, it doesn't matter. And that's what really kills reading. Not picking bad books, but forcing ourselves to get through the wrong books. You're not trying to impress your genius twin. You're just trying to remember that reading can and should be fun. And these easy books can take the form of graphic novels, manga, comic books. Whatever gets those pages turning, it really doesn't matter. But then sadly, even with an easy book, it still might not be enough. Because frankly, you won't read it. Now, we tend to think of our days in large blocks of time. Work, gym, home. But what we lose in thinking that way are really the best times to read. The liminal spaces. They're the in-between times, the ones that we normally destroy. When we're waiting for a train, maybe a meeting ends early. And they're all things that used to bug me until I realized what they could be. I could use them for progress. So I started carrying a book with me absolutely everywhere. In my bag was a book, a notepad, and a pair of socks, because there's nothing worse than having wet socks and completely ruin your day and maybe even your life. And if you see me out and about in New York City, there is a 100% chance that I will have at least one book on me. And this is a fun little experiment, but during the day, start to notice these liminal spaces and add them up. 5 minutes waiting for the train, 30 minutes on the train, 15 minutes between meetings, and 10 minutes sitting on the toilet. There's a lot more instances of it, but that's just the high level. And right there, you have an hour that could be spent making progress on a book. Meaning, in a week, that's 7 hours. More than enough time to read an entire book. Just in time that falls through the cracks normally. And this really is the key, that even with 3 jobs, I was able to read at least 2 books every single week. And really, I'm convinced that the root of all joy in life comes from progress. And by chipping away ever so slightly in these gaps, we give ourselves these little moments to experience a little bit of joy. So I found a tip is, wherever I spend time, keep a book there. Meaning, in your office, next to your bed, on the toilet. Have a book so that instead of reaching for a phone, we can reach for a book and make a little bit of progress. I'm guilty of toilet scrolling, nearly a professional at this point. I wouldn't move until my legs are numb. But now, I have a book there. And I finish a good 6 books a year just from sitting on the toilet and reading. But then there's a problem that sneaks up on you consistently when you start to read. You get bored. Not with reading itself, but with reading the same thing over and over and over again. And by my 6th Lee Child book, it started to feel a little bit like a chore. So I stopped reading one book at a time. And now I always have at least 3 books going at the same time. Fiction for fun, nonfiction to learn something, and then something weird that I know nothing about. And at the moment, I am reading James, my fiction book. I am reading The Art of Spending Money, the nonfiction book. And then I'm reading The Sports Gene, which is about a topic I know nothing about, which is genetics, which came from a rabbit hole that I went down after having my genome sequenced, and I wanted to learn more about it. And basically, to have all these books going at the same time, we need to have a big backlog of books that we want to read. Meaning that we need to create a list. Whenever someone recommends a book, whenever we run across an article that has a book in it and we think we might be interested, add it to that list. Or even better, order it right in that moment. And this will ensure that we always have something that we can lean on. If we get bored of a book, we can pick up a new one, and that we never have those lulls and the gaps between reading, and then we'll fall out of the flow and have to start all over again. And actually, even better on top of that, we can then start to mix up the delivery method. If we're always reading physical books, then maybe we can get an audiobook. Or we can read on the Kindle, or even better, use Speechify, which I wish was a sponsor. And basically, it allows you to both have an audiobook, but then read along at the same time, so it increases your speed and your comprehension because you're using 2 senses. But I know that once I start reading again, I've got a bunch of books going, I run into an issue that ruins everything, and that's turning it into a competition. Do you remember how I told you that this is 114 books? I count every single book I read, and every year I set a goal of reading 100 books. And why? Honestly, because I thought it sounded impressive. And most of the time that meant that I needed to increase my reading speed drastically, and I would even start choosing books based on their length instead of the actual contents. I was gaming the system, turning reading into a performance. And whenever I hit that number at the end of the year, I couldn't wait to tell people. And guess what? Nobody cared. Like, at all. And having a numeric goal, the number of books that you want to read, is fine, particularly in the beginning when you're trying to gain that momentum. But at a certain point, it starts to become a crutch and you start to read for other people instead of for yourself. So at a certain point, I had to ask myself how much of my reading was just loving the idea of being someone who reads a lot. So I deleted my Goodreads, I stopped tracking, and I stopped telling people about all of the reading that I was doing. Now still, at the end of every book I read, I still write a summary and put it into my list, but no longer do I have a counter that ticks up every time I add a book to it. And at first I think this slowed down my reading a little bit. Started to do it less. But then I actually started to enjoy the books I was reading. I slowed down, I chewed on them more, and then, as a result, I started to enjoy reading more, which then created a positive feedback loop. I enjoyed it more, so I did it more often. Because the point isn't just to read more books. The point is to remember why we started and love reading in the first place.